On today's show, we're talking with Dementia 13 director Richard Lemay on No Rest for the Weekend. Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, the show where we talk to the creators of independent film and series. I'm your host, Victoria Oliver. Richard Lemay is a producer, writer, director, best known for dramas like 200 American and Naked as We Came. Recently, he directed the NBC Universal remake of Francis Ford Coppola's Dementia 13. Our producer, Jason Godbey, had a chance to speak with Richard about his experience as a filmmaker.
Hi, it's Jason Godbey for No Rest for the Weekend. With me today is director Richard Lemay. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you.
So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. You taking the time to come down here to the Rabbit Hole Studio, as we call it. So I wanted to talk to you about you first and get a feeling, just a little bit about your background. How did you get into filmmaking? What was your first approach?
I fell into an acting career. I did a bunch of movies that I don't even want to talk about, and but I really fell in love with acting, and I shot my first feature just to be an actor, and I fell in love with the other side of it. So, and I've never looked back. I just kept shooting films. So,
and from there, you made some early features.
I never did a short. I went straight to
Really?
features. I shot my first feature was horrible, but I loved it. I loved making it, and it was really bad. And then my next feature was really horrible, but I loved making it. And the one after that was really bad. But the thing about these things that I try to tell young filmmakers is I just kept shooting, and I wore every hat. I was writer, producer, director. I DP'd. I edited these features. I did wardrobe. I did all the scheduling. I did everything. So they were low budget, and they were just like thrown together. But you learn on your feet, and you start learning what you can do as a director and what you can get from people. So even though those movies may have really, sucked really bad, at the end of the day, it was my film school. I didn't go to film school, by the way.
I did, it's funny, I did the same thing. I made a short. It was like a 20-minute short. I made it on 16mm film. And, produced and wrote and, even acted in it. And, it's no longer on the resume, but it was my film school. That's what, making the first film was my film school, especially working on film. Now, with the first early round of shorts, were you still able to get distribution for those?
For those, no. And I was funding them myself.
My God.
And let me go back a bit. My first film was on Super 16 with a blow-up to 35mm. And back then, film was the thing. You didn't really do video. And immediately afterwards, they had, that whole Dogma movement. And people were just doing all this digital stuff that I used to think I would never do. And I saw this movie called The Celebration. And that is a Danish film, and it blew my mind because it was all about characters and story. And it wasn't pretty, but it was about telling a story. And I thought, I can do that. And so I put a little money into, I bought a Canon XL1 back in the day, a mini DV, and I bought some great microphones and an adapter. And I shot 3 features with that thing.
It's so funny because Anthony Dodd Mantle, who was the DP on Celebration, won the Academy Award for Slumdog Millionaire. And, same thing. They shot, he did with Danny, is it Danny O'Brien? They did the 24 days later, the zombie picture.
28 days later.
28 days later.
Yeah.
So they did that picture together, and that's what they shot on. I think they shot on the Canon XL1 or XL2. I made a short on that camera.
Yeah.
Everybody did because it was the first sort of digital camera that you could change lenses on.
Yeah.
And it didn't cost you your house.
Yeah. It was one of the best investments I ever made.
So after that, you started to get work as a director.
I generated all my own projects. So
right.
After that, I said, what am I doing? I'm going broke, and here I was in New York and, living the dream, but I literally was going broke. So I made a movie called 200 American, which, it's another, I look at it and I cringe, but it sold internationally and it was financially, it was an amazing success. And that kind of opened the doors for the next feature. I had, distributors all over the world who wanted the next film. So it led me to just kind of keep going in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the old Hollywood saying, it's like a good movie is a movie that makes money and a bad movie is a movie that loses money. But you were able, that's great though, that you were able to get something and just jump into it, make features. So you just, you recently made Dementia 13, which came out in October of 2017.
Yep.
How did that picture come about? Like, how did you wind up getting that job?
I was called in by Dan DeFilippo, the producer and one of the writers, and we had a conversation. I read the script. I thought it was really fast paced, and I thought I could bring a lot to it. So I showed up at my first meeting with it was Universal, so I wanted to impress everyone. I had storyboards, and I really kind of thought it through. And it's funny when I look at those storyboards, they translated directly to the film itself. So, it was pretty cool. I think everyone was on board for what I could bring to the table.
And so this film, for the home audience that doesn't know, Dementia 13 was originally a Francis Ford Coppola film that was made in the 60s for Roger Corman.
Right. So, well, it was, I think, Francis Ford Coppola's first feature.
Oh, it was very...
And
before
for $10,000, I think, or in 10 days. It was some incredibly rushed experience.
The typical Roger Corman, slate. Can you make this in a weekend for $10?
And people can say what they want, but there's glimmers of Francis Ford Coppola's genius, to be seen in that. And I'm a huge fan of Francis Ford Coppola, by the way.
And then I think later than that, he made Finnegan's Rainbow with Fred Astaire. That was like a big studio picture that was shot on the Warner Brothers lot. And he was kind of like the kid from film school who made it, in like big time Hollywood. Everybody was like, everybody heard of Francis Ford Coppola at that time, because literally no other kid had done that. Now, so with this movie, without spoiling the plot or anything, what was kind of different enough about it to make it worth remaking?
Well, like I said, I got hired to direct it. So from my point of view, I wanted to maintain the dysfunctional family dynamic. I think that was really important to honor, because I think Francis Ford Coppola tapped into that really well in that movie. We kind of take the horror aspect to the next level. I mean, in the next two levels, it goes. It's a horror movie, as opposed to the beginning. I mean, the original was kind of more of a thriller, whodunit kind of thing. You're not sure what you're looking at. We go there. There's all kinds of stuff happening. It's kind of grisly at times.
Had you ever directed a horror before?
I actually directed a movie called Bloodbound that I didn't complete. I was still editing when I got the call for Dementia 13. So when I got the job, I had to press pause on Bloodbound, and I recently just finished that.
And did the people at Universal see that, and that's why they? Oh, I see.
Yeah, so they got. I sent them a rough cut, and they got to watch it, and I got the job. So
this guy can do this kind of picture.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Speaking of horror movies, I remember years ago I went to an event. I think it was at DCTV, and they had a bunch of guys who were like distribution brokers and stuff. They're film brokers. They would kind of take you and take your film, and you bring it to them, and they'd find a distributor for it. And I remember I had asked one of the guys, I said two questions. I said, is the industry as sort of genre driven as I think it is? Like, how much does it matter what you make? And then I said, the second question is, if you were to make your first feature right now, what genre would you pick? And before I could finish my sentence, he said horror. And I see now, like, when you look at directors like Peter Jackson and Guillermo del Toro, when you see these guys, they all started with these kind of low-budget horror films. And my question is, obviously, you're getting, you're working with a major company, you're working with Universal with a low-budget horror. How do you make a good one? Like, how do you, because you've got special effects and you've got all these different elements to it. Like, how do you do that and still maintain the budget you're given?
I think for me, it's the cheapest solution. I think you have to focus on your core story. For me, the family dynamic of Dementia 13, So if you're looking at that, then you have to really concentrate on the acting and the arcs that these characters go through. And whatever happens after that, be it the horror element, is just an addition. So I don't ever, it's funny, everyone kept thinking, because I'm probably more known for my dramas. I did a movie called Naked as We Came, which was critically acclaimed, won some awards. And, everyone thought I was going to do that again. And so when I did horror, everyone's like, well, how do you do that? I think of horror as a drama where things get out of hand, And so I don't like to think of it as, I'm doing a horror, it has to be a horror formula. I think you have to honor the drama like you would in any story.
It's funny that you say that, because one of my favorite movies, you consider it a horror movie, is The Haunting. And in that movie, there's no blood, there's no real big special effects moments. I think they did some things where you hear banging on the wall, and you just see a shot of a wall. But I love that movie, and it keeps me, and it's because the acting is where it needs to be, and it's basically like heightened melodrama kind of thing. But that's a good thing to point out, is that if you have a good story and you have good actors.
Look at Rosemary's Baby.
Oh,
it's timeless. It's timeless.
Love
it looks
that
like
movie.
A period piece that was made last year, and it's because of those performances are flawless. Or even The Exorcist. For me, it's about Ellen Burstyn freaking out that her daughter is turning into this rotting creature, and it's not about the girl's head spinning and the pea soup and whatnot.
Yeah, because you could literally take all of that stuff out, and it's a drama about a possessed girl and how do you deal with that. That's a great point as well. I think so many people miss that, and they think that the horror is about how many hands you cut off and
which I don't gravitate towards at all.
No, I'm not. For me, I somebody asked me if I would ever do it, and I said I'm not a horror fan. But if you said what are your top 3 horror pictures, I'd say like The Shining, Rosemary's Baby, and The Haunting, and maybe Alien.
That's one of my favorites. Yeah,
I mean
that's perfect to me.
I mean, there's definitely but it's basically a slasher film in space.
It is, but you know what? You watch that movie and you care about every single one of those people, and the secondary characters, they have real, honest banter. It's not just BS that just to get them to the place where they get killed. You actually get invested in everybody, and I think that's Alien is a perfect movie in my opinion.
It works on so many levels. The sci-fi element, even though it's in outer space, it's in the future, it still feels real. They still feel, like you said, they still feel like real people. And I think that's an element a lot of people miss, is like, if you don't start with real people, we won't care about them. And we need to care about people. Because how many times you see a horror movie and you're like, well, I don't care about any of these people, so if they get, it's just the only thing I care about is how creatively they get killed.
But that's I think a trap that a lot of people get into, and we all go there. When I did Dementia, I said, I know I got to give the fans what they want. I did what I could with the characters, and then, we bashed some heads in and chopped people up with axes. I'm not going to lie, but that's not something I tend to gravitate towards as a moviegoer. But, I think there's a little of everything in Dementia 13.
I feel like anytime you see a low budget, and by low budget I mean like, under $1 million or $2 million. Whenever you see one of those movies, I've recommended even on my blog movies like that, because you probably saw films too when you were younger that you could kind of see the themes showing, and that teaches you. That's like, it's a great sort of way to learn directing. And with this picture, you had a pretty solid cast in terms of the talent that you're working with, so you're in good hands that way. And then when I spoke to Adonis, he was talking about creating the atmosphere of it and having that be a big element to it. And that's just sound. So, that's not...
that's just music.
Yeah.
And, I got a lot to say about everything, and I'm not a musician. I love Adonis because we've done 3 films together, and he's very patient with me because he's a real musician, and I'm not. It's a different language, but I got lots to say. And I always think, God, we come out of these meetings, I'm like, geez, he's so patient, and he does some brilliant work. But I have a lot to say about everything. And I think as a director, you kind of have to.
I mean, you are the be-all and the end-all of the film, provided, you're not doing a big budget movie where the studio takes it away from you. But
yeah, exactly.
But like at that level, when you're doing low budget, you are the the director, the producer, and the guy who says yes and no to just about every element. Speaking of this is a terrible ham-handed segue, but speaking of being a director and different things that you do as a director, I know that you've written, you've produced, and currently you make your living almost purely as a director. And how do you do that? Like, what's because obviously features you're not doing every day for the most part. Most directors don't get to direct a feature all the time.
Right. Well, and to be clear, I've probably made more of a living as a producer than I did as a director until recent years. But I still, I did some like Discovery ID shows, Mind of a Murderer and What History Forgot, and I was a segment producer. You produce and direct, so you actually have to write, produce, direct within the confines of actual like showrunners and executive producers who really are the boss.
A lot of people, they want to be filmmakers, they want to be directors, but most people think that they're going to live this Steven Spielberg dream, where they're going to be directing features and they're just going to go from one feature to the other. But most of us don't get to do that.
Yeah, and there was a time when I would do, I did music videos, I did corporate videos, a lot of them. I did stuff for like Cornell and Prentice Hall Publishing, and I would do these high-end, what do you call them? I guess corporate videos for their in-house learning or whatnot. And I just looked at them all as an excuse to shoot, And I was learning as much as I was, I acted like I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know what I was doing. You jump into this situation and you just do the best you can and treat the client like a king or a queen, and you end up giving them what they want. And so I made a living probably doing more of that stuff than features in the beginning. Yeah,
and it is all filmmaking. Like you're still telling a story. You're still composing shots. You're still working with actors, and it's a great testing ground, I think. You mentioned that you've done quite a bit of television. What, in your mind, what was the biggest difference between directing something for TV or directing a feature?
Well, the adage that I've kind of become privy to in the last few years is TV is a producer's medium. So the producers have all the say. And that's cool if you can check yourself and know that you have to bring a certain level of technical skill to a bigger picture. The showrunners and producers, they're the ones really guiding the story and what they want to say and what the content is going to be. So you can't just run amok. You can't just make decisions because you're the director. On a film set, it's different. It's a director's medium, and you make all the decisions based on in that moment. Because every day there's a problem, and it's how you react on your feet to that problem. And there's always problems. That defines what this is going to be, for good or for bad. Yeah,
with TV, it's like you're not coming in on the pilot usually. So, if you're working with actors, if you're directing an episode of, CSI or something, they all know those characters. They know what they would and would not do. And I think for the most part, if they have questions, they're probably talking to the showrunner. They're not looking to the director.
Well, look at Game of Thrones. There's like different directors for every episode, and which on one hand you're like, what? But I'm sure they all get into a meeting with the showrunners and producers. They all get on the same page, and then you have to just make it happen.
And you have to realize that it's their show. It might be your episode, but it's their show. And I think it's an interesting challenge. I mean, I've done that too. Like I've directed promotional videos and stuff, and like talking about the client. And I realized quickly when I did kind of my first one with a real budget, I was like, yeah, this might be my job, but it's their thing, and they're writing the check, so I have to make their movie for them, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just about out of time here, but I want you to talk about. You mentioned Bloodbound, which you said you had worked on, hit pause when you did Dementia 13, and now you're back up and running on that again?
We completed it. We have a sales agent, and we are trying to sell it. So we'll see what happens. Festivals and distribution deals. We've had a couple offers already, but we're kind of navigating these waters, and we have Eden Brolin. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but Josh Brolin's daughter as the lead, and she's in that show Beyond, and she's really special. She's a very, very special human, not just an actor, but she really gives a performance that I think people are going to be blown away by.
She inherited her dad's intensity?
She sure did. And you know, not just that, but the work ethic. And she's the real deal. I predict big things for her, and I hope she gets everything because she's great.
Give me like the pitch for the movie. Like if you were pitching me for distribution right now, what's the movie about?
Well, it's a family of witches come to a small northern town to perform an ancient ritual, and it's all based on human sacrifice. But it's not one of those gory. There is some gore in it, but it's really a methodical, like, character piece, and I think that's where Eden takes the whole film to the next level.
And this is present day set, or like sort of
present
Salem?
day.
Present day. Oh, okay. So it's present day witches.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Before we go, if you wouldn't mind, if you have any advice for anyone looking to get into directing. I know I'm springing this question on you.
No, I get asked it a lot, actually.
What's give me like the number one, number two thing that you would say? Listen, if you're gonna try to make it as a director, this is what you should do.
You have to shoot. You have to shoot. There is no way around it. They have movies. The movie Tangerine was shot on an iPhone, so there is no excuse. Technology is in our hands. You can do what you want with it, and at the end of the day, you just have to hone your craft. And if that means taking your iPhone and getting shots and lining stuff up and working on your composition and your ability to control a moment, it just behooves you to shoot as much as you can. You know, I was a knucklehead. I just started shooting features. But, you know, at the end of the day, that's my resume. You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter whether they're good or bad. You don't learn from winning, you learn from failure, and so there is no failure. You just have to keep going.
That's excellent. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, Richard, for coming out. It was terrific having you. I hope when Bloodbound comes out, we can have you back again and talk to you about that project. But thanks for coming in today, and we'll see you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
As always, thank you for joining us and taking a trip down the rabbit hole. I'd like to thank our guest, Richard Lemay. And if you'd like to see more from Behind the Rabbit Productions, check out our website, btrp.nyc. On behalf of Jason Godbey and myself, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.